welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Conflict-affected societies face a variety of problems that can harm the local level of social cohesion. And in eastern Ukraine, where the Russian hybrid war rages on for the fifth year now, the issue of social cohesion became an especially pressing matter for local communities. To help evaluate the problem, the UN score, or USE for short, was introduced. It provides a specific insight into societal dynamics and identifies what needs to be done to change the situation for the better. To learn more about this, we welcome in our studio today Therese Svensson. She's a peace and development specialist at UNDP Ukraine. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So tell us about the index.
Yes. So as you correctly pointed out, USE, which is the abbreviation for the UN Social Cohesion and Reconciliation Index for Eastern Ukraine, is an analytical tool that is here to help us, the implementing UN agencies, in this case UNDP, UNICEF, the Children Fund, and the International Organization for Migration, to better understand the societal dynamics in the east of the country.
Okay.
And by the east of the country, we are referring to the government-controlled parts of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, including Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia Oblast.
Okay. So what is the main aim of this index? What exactly are you evaluating, and how long has it existed?
So this tool was brought to Ukraine last year. It comes initially from Cyprus. That's where it was developed several years ago, and has since then been implemented in several countries across the world. So what we're doing is that we are identifying entry points for how we can increase levels of social cohesion. And by social cohesion, we're referring both to relations between people, so the vertical level in society, so to say, so how people interact and think about each other. But we're also referring to the relationship between the society, between people, and the government or the governmental institutions that are there to serve them.
So how is the communication inside the communities, meaning the east of Ukraine, and how is the communication in between the Ukrainian society in the east of Ukraine and the government? What's the difference?
So, as I mentioned, this tool has been implemented in many different parts of the world. But of course, we need to make sure that when we're talking about social cohesion, it actually makes sense in a Ukrainian context. So social cohesion wouldn't look the same or have the same strengths or weaknesses in the east of Ukraine as it would have in Liberia, for example. So the starting point is to engage stakeholders, governmental and from the civil society side, to have an open discussion about what are the issues or what makes up social cohesion in eastern Ukraine.
How open are the government officials in this process? How willing are they to participate?
I would say that they are very willing and very open to do so. So each score, each use cycle consists of several series of consultations. So to start with, we go out to the 5 eastern oblasts. We meet with the local and regional administrations, and we meet with civil society representatives, and we have an honest discussion with them. So what are the strengths and weaknesses? What should we be looking at this point in time to properly understand the situation?
Which is the most common problem voiced?
I would say that it differs between the different oblasts, and that is also why we have chosen to do a deep dive into the east of Ukraine. Also recognizing that the strengths and weaknesses, they're going to be different in Mariupol, for example, and in Kramatorsk. So if we were to look at Luhansk Oblast, for example, and especially in the more rural parts, one of the main concerns raised and what has come out of the use analysis is the feeling of being isolated, of being far away from the center, from Kiev, and which translates into a perception or a feeling, especially among the younger part of the population, that maybe this isn't the perfect place for building a future. And that, of course, impacts on their wish to migrate, on their wish to leave their home.
Okay, and what about Dnipro, for example?
So in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, for example, we have many of the country's IDPs are residing in this oblast, as well as many of the former combatants. So in that case, it makes sense to look at the intergroup relations and to see what are the issues in relation to social service provision. Then in other parts, it might make more sense to look at civic engagement. There might be parts of the oblast that have particularly low levels of activism or of people being engaged in civil and political affairs. And the reasons for that, that's also going to differ between different parts. It might relate to a lack of time. It might, as in some rayons, be related to a feeling that the authorities are not always 100% open to listening to what they have to say, or that they simply don't know what is on the agenda of the councils or other bodies. So that's why we are looking at the perceptions and understandings of social cohesion at such a deep level, because the whole population of the eastern part of the country, they're not the same. And the strengths and weaknesses are going to differ between them.
Since the problems are all different in the different regions and in different cities and towns and settlements and so on and so forth, I assume that there is no simple solution to the issue. I wouldn't call it a problem, but I would call it an issue. How do we deal with that? How do we make their lives better, the lives of those people better, so they don't feel isolated, as you just said, and they don't feel left out, and so on?
Well, again, the key is to have a local approach to how to address decreasing or low levels of social cohesion. So we cannot...
Is that the task for the government? Is that the task for the local administrations? Or maybe residents should be also educated on this matter?
Absolutely. It's not only the responsibility of the UN or only of the government or of individual citizens, and that is the main reason for why we chose to make all the results from use available online. So we have a website that is there in English, Ukrainian, and Russian. All the analysis is there for everyone to use to help them inform their activities, their programs, and their policies. So if I'm a civil activist in Mariupol, I can go to the website use.scoreforpeace.org, and I can zoom in on the southern part of Donetsk Oblast and see what are the components of social cohesion that are particularly low, that have low scores in my community, and which are the groups that score particularly low, so that I can target my programs or my activities on those demographic groups and those issues. In the same way as if I work in one of the oblast administrations and I'm in the process of developing a new policy or a new yearly plan. So then this tool is here to help understand what are the specific solutions that we should be focusing on, either in the oblast as a whole or in a certain part or in certain rayons. And what is important to mention here, because there are so many surveys being conducted in Ukraine like every month, so there is a lot of information out there about what are the problems. The problem is the trust in the central institutions, or it's the unemployment. So we know that more or less. So that's why we're taking it one step further to actually help inform programmatic and policy development. So on the one hand, we have the strengths, the weaknesses, the issues identified at oblast level and at local level. We have the breakdown for different demographic groups, so we know who we should be working with in those specific locations. But then we also have a predictive element to it. And this is where it actually helps inform our policies and programs. So take, for example, to come back to civic engagement. So there's one thing to say that people are not as active in Eastern Ukraine as we wish they were. Okay, so what do we do about that? Do we go out and tell people, come on,
be more active.
Be active, go out, demonstrate, sign a petition, go to a meeting? No, we need to understand what are the drivers behind inactiveness, if you wish, and how can we work with those drivers? So there might be factors that are positively influencing why people choose to be active in the same way as there are factors that are negatively influencing. Absolutely. So if a negative factor is lack of time, I do not have the time to get engaged in anything outside of the private sphere. Well, then we need to think about, for example, electronic solutions to engagement. If another negative factor or driver is a perception that I do not have the political security to feel comfortable to express my views, then we need to work on the communication or the dialogue between, for example, local councils and the citizens.
You mentioned that the index has already existed in several countries before being conducted in Ukraine. How does the result differ from the result of Ukraine and the other countries?
It's always a temptation to get into a comparison between different countries in order to understand, well, are we doing good or bad?
Maybe there's some experience we can take up.
So on the one hand, the methodology is universal, so to say, that we have the series of consultations, we develop a model, we go out and measure these concepts, we analyze the results, and we come up with recommendations for policies and programmatic interventions. But a very important point here is that even though some of the indicators that we are looking at, they are named the same in Cyprus, in Liberia, and in Ukraine. For example, political security. But then how exactly we measure it, so what are the questions that we go out and ask people? They're going to have to be different.
Of course, because the situation is different.
Exactly. So that's why we're a little bit cautious when it comes to comparison between countries. But we think what makes more sense is to compare over time. So as we speak, we are in the process of implementing the second wave of use. So
how often do you plan to conduct the use index?
Every year.
Every year?
Every year.
Okay.
And so even though we might want to say, well, we're doing much better than Liberia, or we're doing worse than Moldova. Well, yeah, okay, but we're not looking at exactly the same things, and the context is very different. But when we start comparing over time, we can see, okay, last year we had the migration tendency in Luhansk Oblast was particularly high in comparison with other oblasts, and we know that that is very closely connected to job opportunities, etc. So then, as an example, we developed programs and policies to address that issue. Then ideally, the next year, we would see some kind of improvement. In the same way as in some other areas, we might see that, oh, actually things here aren't going in the right direction. So we need to readjust our programs and our ideas a little bit. So I think that comparison is much more useful than looking at other countries. That said, I think it's still valuable and it makes sense to draw upon the results and experiences from other countries, maybe in particular in our region, where Moldova, for example, has made an effort to focus more specifically on gender norms and gender stereotypes. So therefore, we looked towards Moldova this year to see, Is that something that would make sense also in Ukraine? Well, yeah, the concepts as such would make sense, but we need to adjust the questions. We need to adjust how we are actually measuring it.
In general, which countries, what type of countries does the index imply to? I mean, you cannot be measuring every country like an economically successful country as the USA. So obviously, this is the country that has to have some problems, like Ukraine has the war going on, the high level of corruption. You said already Moldova, Libya. What else? What are the qualifications that need to be fulfilled by the country to have the index implemented?
Well, I would disagree with you that it wouldn't make sense to have the index implemented in countries that have reached a higher level of development. So, for example,
but for some reason it's not implemented in every country, right?
It's not, but for example, I'm from Sweden, and there are current discussions about implementing the index in Sweden.
Wow.
Of course, it's not a country in a armed conflict, but we still have our own issues with the, relations between people of different cultures, and that is definitely contributing to, I wouldn't expect the levels of social cohesion in certain parts of my home country to be much better than some of the parts of Ukraine. So, yeah, I think that it makes sense to implement it in not every single country of the world, of course, but we shouldn't be looking at it as we shouldn't be looking at it as a tool that is simply implemented in countries where there's a big problem. I mean, obviously, it was developed in Cyprus that has had a conflict ongoing for many years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for clarifying and explaining the index and its values.
Thank you for having me.
That was Therese Svensson. She is Peace and Development Specialist at UNDP Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned with UATV for the rest.